Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. Today morning, we have not one but two distinguished persons joining us from Puducherry, the headquarters, that is Pondicherry. One of them is Dr. Ananda Reddy, and the other, Deep Shikhaji. Both of them are not just together on the spiritual journey, but also partners in life. Dr. Ananda Reddy is a very meticulous and thorough academic, and Deep Shikhaji is blessed with a melodious voice, which he uses for doing the mother's work. So to set the tone for the day, we'll start with a musical offering by Deep Shikhaji.
जयतु जयतु भगवान अरविंद जयतु जयतु भगवान अरविंद प्रभुताया परमाद्भुत धाम जयतु जयतु भगवान अरविंद प्रभुताया परमाद्भुत धाम पतितोद्धारक परम सुखकरम् पतितोद्धारक परम सुखकरम् यस्य सुधा मधुरं शुभम् जयतु जयतु भगवान मांगल्यानां महिमाधार पीयूषाणां पारवान मांगल्यानां महिमाधार पीयूषाणां पारवान सौन्दर्यानां शाश्वत सार सौन्दर्यानां शाश्वत सार हृदये यस्य दिवाकर जयतु जयतु भगवान अरविंद प्रभुताया परमाद्भुत धाम पतितोद्धारक परम सुखकरम् यस्य सुधा मधुरं शुभनाम जयतु जयतु भगवान 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 अरविंद जयतु जयतु भगवान अरविंद। नमो मात्रे जगन्मात्रे भगवत्यै नमो नमः। नमो मात्रे जगन्मात्रे भगवत्यै नमो नमः। महाशक्त्यै महाव्यक्त्यै महमूर्त्यै नमो नमः। महाशक्त्यै महाव्यक्त्यै महमूर्त्यै नमो नमः। नमो देव्यै महादेव्यै सत्सेव्यायै नमो नमः। नमो देव्यै महादेव्यै सत्सेव्यायै नमो नमः। धर्मधात्रै विधात्रै च वरदात्रै नमो नमः। धर्मधात्रै विधात्रै च वरदात्रै नमो नमः। नमो मात्रे जगन्मात्रे भगवत्यै नमो नमः। तवैवाहं तवैवाहं तवैव शाश्वती समः। तवैवाहं तवैवाहं तवैव शाश्वती समः। सेवामसक्तः सदा भक्तः प्रेमयोगपरायण। सेवामसक्तः सदा भक्तः प्रेमयोगपरायण। त्वमेव मम मातासि देवी दिव्यदयामयी। त्वमेव मम मातासि देवी दिव्यदयामयी। अङ्के ज्योतिर्मये तेऽहं सुधां सेवे सुखीषि। अङ्के ज्योतिर्मये सुधां सेवे सुखी शिशु नमो मात्रे जगन्मात्रे भगवत्यै नमो नमः नमो नमः नमो नमः.
Welcome once again, everyone. After this melodious singing and giving a very peaceful start to our session, I extend my formal welcome to Dr. Reddy. As even Sir said, he needs no formal introduction. Everybody in the ashram circle, scholars and devotees, know Dr. Reddy very closely. But to just give you a brief to all our participants, Dr. Reddy is the founder, director of Sri Aurobindo Center for Advanced Research in Pondicherry, and he also holds the position of chairman in the Institute of Human Study, Hyderabad. He has been traveling all across the globe and sharing the vision and teachings of Sri Aurobindo. He studied in the ashram school in Pondicherry and had the fortune of being under the direct guidance of Mother since 1958. And he had many exchanges through interviews and letters with the mother. And under her guidance, he also got an opportunity to serve in Auroville before he went on further to complete his studies and teach abroad. And then he came back to Pondicherry and started building Sakar. To his credit, he has more than 800 recorded lectures on Sri Aurobindo's work, his edited volumes of work on Life Divine, and 100 plus articles sharing the works and vision of Sri Aurobindo. For his work regarding on the Sri Aurobindo scholarship, he has been awarded Sri Aurobindo Puraskar and Oro Ratna Award. It's a great pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Reddy. We look forward to your lecture today. Thank you for taking out time. Over to you.
Namaskar. Thank you for the brief introduction. I know that Dr. Bijlani has been holding several lectures and classes on the different systems of yoga. And I'm supposed to start with the synthesis of yoga. I do know that yesterday Dr. Bijlani gave you an introductory talk on synthesis of yoga. But I, for one, would like to go and see and analyze what is the synthesis of yoga. Is it really something different from other yogas? I mean, synthesis of integral yoga. Or is it really radically different from other yogas, or is it something that is common with other yogas? So I wanted to really get a little deeper into the genesis of this, even this word integral yoga. It's easy to understand, yes, integral, we think, it's a combination of all the other yogas and synthesis of all the other yogas. But let's see at the end of the day what we conclude. You see, the first thing that normally people think of synthesis of yoga is all life is yoga. I mean, it's been quoted so often. I'm afraid that it has been misconstrued, misunderstood. In fact, somewhere there's been a kind of a wrong use also of this sentence, all life is yoga. Is really all life yoga? Now let's see what we mean by yoga. Because Sri Aurobindo in one of the sentences in Integral Synthesis writes that all life is either consciously or subconsciously yoga. There are two things. It is consciously or subconsciously yoga. To take up the second part, subconsciously yoga, it is actually, subconsciously it's a vast yoga of nature, as we call it, nature's own yoga. So first of all, when we say this all life is yoga, we have to apply this to nature. That nature herself is doing this yoga. Long before humanity or long before mankind came upon earth, yoga had already started by Prakriti, by nature. Then we have to define yoga a little differently than what we are used to, yoga means union and all that. But actually, in its essence, yoga is a change or transformation of consciousness. How do you do that? Change and transformation of consciousness, a heightening and broadening of consciousness. It's not just some do's and don'ts do not make yoga. Do this and don't do that. That's why Mother Sri Aurobindo never tell us do this and don't do that. These are not do's and don'ts. The whole point is heightening, broadening, and deepening of one's consciousness. And how do you do that? And there is the question of uniting with a higher consciousness. So this is the essence. You have to broaden and heighten your consciousness with the help of a higher consciousness. That is yoga. So in that sense, what you see is that nature has been doing that since times immemorial. This heightening and broadening of consciousness is another word for the word evolution. So what do we understand? Yoga is actually evolution. It's in this broad term that Sri Aurobindo uses the word all life is yoga. Because when we speak of life, we speak of this nature's life or life in nature. And then we see this life in nature is the question of evolution. And how did this evolution take place? All of us know that. Of course, we have Sri Aurobindo made it amply clear that when there was this matter completely occupying this earth, only matter. So what did nature do? It did some kind of a yoga, a tapasya. You may call it, it's not a conscious tapasya, but we said there are two categories, subconscious and conscious. So nature has done a subconscious yoga, and out of this matter, it brought forth a greater energy, a greater principle called life energy. So with the descent of the life principle, there was the birth of life that emerged from matter. So you see, there is already a heightening and widening of consciousness from matter to life. So this process is very well followed, this heightening and broadening and deepening of consciousness. And similarly, when life came upon earth in its resplendent green coverage all over the earth, it really grew. It was responding so beautifully. But that nature did not stop there. Again, it brought forth a new higher principle. That is the mental principle. And when it brought down the new principle, then it came upon earth human beings. So in this way it is going on, widening and expanding its consciousness, each time bringing a higher principle. And now at this stage, Sri Aurobindo would say, it is Prakriti, nature herself, who is bringing about a new principle called the supermind. And when the supermind is brought down, then there will be supramental consciousness and rays upon earth. And the thing is, when we say the higher principle is brought down, there is an agency who is known as the avatar. So the avatar who brings a new principle, and then Prakriti receives the new principle, and it generates birth and new forms. So you see, there is already a natural process that has taken place over millennia. And so what we are doing now is that there is always a new principle that comes down to give birth to new expansion of consciousness. This is what we can say on the level of the subconscious yoga of nature. Now, if you remember this principle, we can apply the same thing to the conscious yoga, which is taken up by human beings. Supposed to be taken up, is not yet taken up. In principle, is supposed to be taken up. So if that is so, how does it happen? Is in the human beings also we see this question of expansion of consciousness. But human beings also had to really go through a long process. The process from the physical to the vital to the nature to the spiritual. So in this regard, we see that the question of the human beings, how do they proceed? You see, at the animal level, at the physical level, there is some kind of a growth. But as we will see, Sri Aurobindo writing in the synthesis again, that basically 4 principles: growth, possession, enjoyment, and battle. So remember these 4 words: growth, possession, enjoyment, and battle. Battle and conquest is this. So ultimately we see that these are the 4 powers of nature that nature has provided us. So all our life, we call it all life, is this actually the definition of all life is just these 4 words: growth, possession, enjoyment, and battle. It's not that I go to play cricket, or I'm a hotelier, or do the samskaras, I'm a singer, or I'm a dancer. These are not the activities that we are looking upon when we say all life is yoga. Sri Aurobindo doesn't mention which part. He doesn't say if you are a pujari, you are doing yoga. If you are a dancer, you are doing yoga. If you are a footballer, he doesn't say all that. Why? Because the definition of life is these 4 words: growth, enjoyment, possession, and battle. You take up any action in your life, they all fall into one of these 4 categories. So now we have got the real clue to the word life. And now when we see this question of life, is there a possibility that how are these 4 principles taken up? Well, on the physical level, when humanity was purely on the physical level, it did follow. Because we have grown from the physical consciousness to the vital consciousness. Those of us who are living on the physical consciousness even now, there are other things that have come into play, which have come from the animal physical consciousness. That is what is important to see, that although we call ourselves human, basically on the physical level, we are still animal. Why do you call that? Because we have the same basic instincts of the animal. Self-preservation, self-reproduction, and herd mentality. You can see all our so-called sophisticated society, sorry to say, is basically nothing but these three. In all the terms of technology, the terms of this and that, basically we are looking after our food, like animals do. Then the question of reproduction, because we all have to want to produce and see ourselves in the future. Somehow every man and woman think that I want to live permanently, if not eternally. That permanent living is what is called bearing children. So through the children you want to live forward. That's what animals have done. And then how do you do all that? Animals go for a herd mentality. The animals, the elephant, the lions, the hyenas, and all of them, they go in a herd mentality because that is their safety. And we are doing the same. Of course, this herd mentality has gone to a great extent of building up armies and destroying each other. But that's a more and more sophistication, if I can use the word. So on the physical level, we are still on the animal mentality. This is what we call, in one of his articles, Ananda Reddy actually, calls the nature's control. So basically, all of us human beings first go through the process of nature's control. In all the knowledge, your technology has come to help us with all the controls, with all the power that is there in our mobiles and everything. But nothing but these three only. But in these three, the next in evolution, next step. Not all have done. Not all can do that. We are mostly busy with eating, reproduction, and herd mentality, giving it all kinds of beautiful, acceptable, fancy names. We call this an association, we call that an association, this group, that group. But basically, what is it, the consciousness happening? This thing. Now we will say there is next step, kind of a higher step, if we can call it. And that higher step is what we say the human control or the mental control. The first is nature's control. Next comes the human control or the mental control. So this is the next step in the human being's evolution. What is it? Why is it the next step? It is, the animal mentality of food and preservation, etc., is substituted. We say, okay, yeah, I got enough of food, I got enough of lodging, boarding, enough of clothing and all that. Let me pursue something higher, something subtler. This substitution of the physical with the mental consciousness comes in the form of ethics, religion, or now comes here the question of dances and aesthetics and higher levels, higher pursuits of the mind. Of course, the dances, etc., are the higher pursuits of the mind which impose themselves on the physical and the vital. But there comes the next stage of human evolution. So humanity, since its beginning, has given birth to great art and sculpture and architecture and all that. Because some of them, it's not that everybody in the society has got to the stage, but there's only few who have taken up this next step of the substitution. Substitution by a higher consciousness, ethical programs. And one of the things that comes into play here, that we all become aware of our own defects, our problems, and then we say, no, these are the things that are really lacking in me. I should progress. So there's a first jhalak, as we say, the first aspiration, the note, the first signs of aspiration to perfect oneself or to just improve oneself. So you say, if I take to dance, then if I take to music, there's some kind of a inner, going within, and I just begin to touch something deeper, much more around of peace and all that. So this higher pursuit is what is important. Otherwise, we are on the animal stage of self-preservation, hurt feeling and self-reproduction. So if you want to move beyond the physical, you have to come into the mental or the human control, where you become conscious, this outer expansion. And then there's a kind of a deepening that takes place. Deepening, not yet the word deep, but still an insight. Or what we say, the word looking within begins then. No mastery is done, no mastery is found, not looking within. So this is the second step. And then those who are serious and lucky enough come to the next stage. What is the next step? Is transubstantiation, or the word Shri uses, transformation. This is the third level, where from beyond the mind you come to the next stage of transforming your nature. Now it is much more intense, deepening, widening of consciousness. But there is now this step. You see, the second step, I said, okay, I want to widen my consciousness through music and dance and painting, etc. But still a widening is there, deepening is there, but still it's there on the human level, mental level. Of course, there are great intuitions and inspirations in poetry and dance and music. We do not deny that. But it's not yet touching your consciousness. A musician is par excellence a musician on the stage, or the dancer, or the singer, or the artist. But once disconnected with his pursuit, he falls back into his common animalist consciousness. So then comes the question of spirituality, the question of yoga. So that's why not all can take up to yoga. You may have heard so many talks and synthesis of yoga, this yoga, karma yoga, they just heard. Yeah, I asked somebody yesterday, I listened to somebody because we are all book yogis. I learned a lot of things, heard a lot of people say this and that. We know that this should be done. It doesn't sink into our consciousness. This level is very difficult to be taken up. We know our defects, we want to do that, but what lacks is our effort, personal effort. However, not to deal too long on that. Now you see, the third level, which is that of the conscious yoga, where begins the conscious yoga here. And as sure the definition, as many of you must have already heard the definition, where it says, the normal quotation that people would say, yoga is a methodized effort towards self-perfection. Most of the people on the synthesis of yoga, integral yoga, quote this. Yoga is a methodized effort towards self-perfection by the expression of the secret potentialities latent in the being and highest condition of victory in this effort, a union of the human individual with the universal and transcendent existence. See, we just read what is convenient to us. Yoga is union. Union with whom? Okay, with the transcendental, with the universal. But how do you unite? There's a process. So that process is not just a doing, we have all again got into a ritual saying, oh, integral yoga is nothing but aspiration, rejection, surrender. It's easy to say. But then the question is, you see the first one, a methodized effort. It's not a random thing that you take up aspiration, rejection, surrender. So yoga is again a serious business. It's not just talking about it and reading about it. So here you would say that that this question of medium of going further, taking up yoga is the third thing. And here comes Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. Because he has said it's a methodized effort. Methodized, we have the method, full of synthesis, full of them, all the questions and answers, but 17 volumes of the mother, they're full of this methodized efforts. But then what we have to understand is that this method has a meaning, has a measure. Now, you remember, some of you might have read, Sri Aurobindo says, or the mother says, both of them have said somewhere or the other, that integral yoga begins where other yogas end. I mean, so nice to think of that, but and we are all proud and say, oh, integral yoga is kind of superior because we begin where others end. But where do others end? Others end in all human control, second level. The second stage where we said, the human control, there comes most of our Hatha yogas and this yoga and Raja yoga and all that. They're inspired, no doubt, not deny that. Even by great rishis. But still, it is a kind of human effort at its acme. There's nothing beyond that. That means we are doing all this Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga, etc. by my own human effort, by my own challenges, by my own tapasya. So we have gone great distances, but there has been a kind of a block. We could not go further. And that is why integral yoga is required, where the whole principle has turned. It's no more I who am doing the yoga, it is the divine will, it's the Shakti who does the yoga. So you see how Sri Aurobindo has turned this entire tables to say, the third level, the yoga is really when you invoke and you become, you receive the Shakti aspect to transform you. You see, other yogas change you, give you, Hatha yoga gives you tremendous flexibility of the mind, flexibility of the body, energies of the body, you live longer in your life, and the silence of the mind, you need some other, all kinds of things are there. But there's no transformation of nature, no transformation of consciousness. You may be having a transformation in the physical, fine, your physical body has gone, undergone some great transformation, or the mental being or the vital being. For the transformation of the whole being, a new principle is required. Haven't we seen that this is the same principle nature has followed? Always a higher principle comes to transform the lower. Life transforms matter, mind transforms life, and Superman transforms mind. It's always the higher that transforms the lower. So we cannot transform our nature by the whatever amount of tapasya we may be doing, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 120 years. And we have been doing this yoga for centuries together. But human beings have not changed, except for that exceptional individual. Because we are not brought a new principle. And that new principle is what is given to us by Sri Aurobindo Mother. That is Superman. So now you see how Sri Aurobindo and nature have come together. When nature is also seeking to bring in a higher principle to change humanity after all this millennia. But if you remember, I said, to bring the higher principle, nature uses one agent, or the divine uses an agent, whatever you want to call it. That agent, somebody to bring the new principle. And that bringer, that harbinger of the new principle of the supermind is Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. So their entire task was to bring it down. That's what Sri Aurobindo also writes. The major work of the Mother has been to bring down for the first time the supermind to humanity. The rest of the work is the, as Sri Aurobindo has written many times, many places, that supermind will look after. Their business is to link the supermind to matter, to nature, to Prakriti, and say, look, we have done our work. You had asked us to do that. The divine wanted it to be that way. You had aspired to the divine to bring down the Superman. So the Supreme who has brought us down, sent us down. So Sri Aurobindo is the direct action from the divine who was commanded, if I can use the word, to bring down the Superman. And now we understand where we stand vis-a-vis integral yoga. So now with this new power, nature is happy, nature is fulfilled. That for millennia it has prepared itself, at least not the whole of humanity, but Acme, the real pioneers, the real avant-garde, because that's always the progress and evolution is through avant-garde. In fact, even through individuals, you would say. So nature has obviously prepared itself, fulfilled itself through this tremendous culture of the mental culture, through its aesthetics and the paintings and temple architecture and all that. So when humanity or when Prakriti was ready to deliver the new race or the new step, it had aspired. That is what Ashwapati does in Savitri. He aspires on behalf of humanity, saying, "Oh Divine Mother, bring down your new force." And that is the aspiration that Ashwapati has, and that is a response to that Savitri comes, the incarnation of the Supermind. And now we see this aspect of the descent is done. But as we said, it's a methodized effort. So Sri Aurobindo, the synthesis of yoga, brings in this method. He doesn't leave us in the lurch saying, "Hey, I brought Superman, now you guys do what you want." No, there's a method. But may I again make ourselves clear that this method is first of all practiced, fulfilled to the core by Sri Aurobindo and the Mother themselves. Synthesis of yoga is not a book written for you and me. It's almost a diary note. We know that in reality it is a diary note, the record of yoga, transformed and transcribed and transformed is nothing but synthesis of yoga. So we have to be a little aware that it's not really meant for you and me of the day-to-day. We may have all the quotations of rejection, this aspiration, as and all that. But Mother makes it simpler. Because she says all that Sri Aurobindo has done for himself and by himself, and Mother of course has been part of that. They have been doing this. But for you and me, Mother has made it simpler by really answering questions regarding this, regarding the self-will, regarding what is the genesis, how do you go approach and all that. So in there also, you must remember, you may say, "Oh, Sri Aurobindo has spoken about desire and detachment and aspiration and the self-will and anger." But he has not spoken about them Shastras or other yogis. He does speak about them all in the light of the psychic principle. That is why the very importance of Sri Aurobindo's new principle is the psychic being. He does not ask you to sit down for half an hour for meditation and then silence your mind and find your. You do whatever you want, all that are preparations only for the psychic being, to connect with the psychic being. Well, mankind has done enough. It has had so many yogas, so many shastras, so many ways, thousands of them. But there has got to be a new principle of action, new principle of transformation, new principle of yoga. On the universal cosmic level, we say Superman, fine. But on the level of the human beings, we have used our mind and the vital and the physical profusely through different yoga, through different activities. But what Sri Aurobindo the mother have told us is use the new principle to get rid of your anger, your jealousies, your this thing, your tamas, your all the things. No other, that kind of a resolution, New Year resolution. From tomorrow I'll start be controlling myself. Okay, control is good. Control is what is important. Nature taught you control, human beings taught control, and the yoga is also a kind of a control. But unless and until we use the power of the new principle called psychic being, integral yoga cannot succeed. It will fall into once again into one of those old yogas, and then people are happy saying, "Oh, I'm practicing integral yoga." What have you practiced? Sri Aurobindo says, "Where other yogas end, mine begins." Means what? He had asked Sri Aurobindo, had an interview with some sadhaks also, but they said, "I've done meditation, I've done this yoga, I've done that yoga," but they said, "I would realize your psychic being." That unless and until you realize the psychic being, integral yoga does not even begin. Yes, these are very direct, harsh words to hear, maybe because people are in the comfort zone that I'm really meditating here, I'm doing this sadhana, I'm doing 1 hour exercise and all that. All that is the second level of the mental control. It's a preparation, no need, no wonder. In fact, Mother had said long back when she had started the book called the Dhammapada by Buddha, Lord Buddha. She was telling the ashram and saying, you should all start with Dhammapada. Don't get into all this mind, supermind, and this and all that. That means what? Practicing of self-control. Practicing of this question of rejection. You see, it's nice to say aspiration, rejection, and surrender. Aspiration means what? Not just put a incense stick and some flowers and in front of the mother's photo and on samadhi and say, "Ma, I want to." In fact, just yesterday there was some quotation from the mother, somebody said it. He said, basically we human beings are insincere. Fundamentally. Because she says, you go to the samadhi, she didn't use the word samadhi, but you aspire in a nice moment, I want to be this, but the rest of the time we don't even think that we want to do what we have been aspiring for. It's a duty we have done at the samadhi, we have gone, put our flowers and said, finito. The moment I come out, I think of this, I think of that. Mother says, we do not follow our own aspirations, and how do you think we can realize the divine? So aspiration, and then rejection, of course, is very convenient. You say, no, mother will purify me, mother will take care of him. That's absolute tamas. So what I'm trying to say is not kind of dissuading anything, but put a facts really on the plate, on the platter and say, look, this is what integral yoga means. It doesn't mince words. It doesn't want to be, spoon feeding you or giving you a lollipop. Or whatever you wanted to do it, but let us not call it integral yoga. You call it all other yogas a preparation to integral yoga. Mother herself uses the word. All this religion and all these practices are a preparation to a fine, high spiritual life. And this is what we say, it is fulfillment. And Sri Aurobindo uses the word that, it is only when this yoga of nature and when this conscious yoga of man, that means subconscious yoga and the conscious yoga, when they are, what the word uses is conterminous with life itself. And this is exactly conterminous with the term Sri Aurobindo has come in. That when nature has aspired for the new principle. He said, O Supreme Divine, O Purushottama, I have brought humanity to that level of mind and then beyond mind, and now I cannot take them beyond mind unless and until you come down with the new principle of the supermind. And now this is from our side, human side. Sri Aurobindo also has prepared, has seen that some of the human beings are prepared to receive this higher principle. And now this is the conterminous time between nature and the humans, between Prakriti and the human effort. So at this time it says nature outwardly conterminous conterminous with life itself, and we can once more, looking out both on the path and the achievements, say in a more perfect and luminous sense, all life is yoga. So imagine what deep meaning he has given. And we have taken it so superficially, quoted so glibly, put it on 26 January platform and the tableau saying all life is yoga. You know how many people have been misled by that? They think they can do anything in the name of yoga and then they fall into a ditch. So this is the immense meaning right in the first chapter of the synthesis of yoga. He does it. So we have got to be much more serious when we quote this sentence, all life is yoga, and not misuse it. It is so very subconscious, unconscious, and at the level of the supramental consciousness. Rest is all old yoga, rest is all mental control, rest is all human control. That's why only when the psychic being opens or we get contact, then we can say, I'm just stepping on the path. I'm stepping on the path, not even walking on the path of integral yoga. All rest is there, grace, to put you on the path, to take you on the path. That element of grace we cannot avoid. Well, I've just given it our thinking to say, hey, what are we doing with this famous term? And this is what I've come to know, all from Sri Aurobindo. Not that I've invented anything. I'm not calling a single word. It's all Sri Aurobindo, to revise Sri Aurobindo, to re-understand. And that is what the charm of Sri Aurobindo. Each time I give a talk, I go back to the original books and I find new treasures, new layers of understanding. This is what I want to talk to you, friends. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ananda Reddy has done it yet again. In just about half an hour, he has given you the distillate of his what he has imbibed over the last several decades, and clarified in a beautiful way some of the hackneyed but overused expressions such as all life is yoga, integral yoga begins where other yogas end, and that was very valuable. I'm sure he would be happy to answer some questions if you have any.
Namaste, Ananda. Thank you for the very, very illuminating talk, and it was quite a shake-up and much required. My question is around the last 2 years, the whole cycle of churn, and there seems to be an accelerated evolution in place. Maybe a lot of it is subconscious, like you talked about, and it is also universal in nature. So, there are, we observe that more and more faculties are developing, and the challenges are also increasing, and people are talking about very similar themes. Maybe the words are different all over the world, whether it be on social media or on platforms like these and news and so on. So, the mother says night is darkest before the break of dawn. And so what is the positive in the last 2 years? If you could talk a bit about that based on your profound experience and observation, then that would be really valuable for us. Thank you so much. Namaste again.
Well, sorry, I was adjusting my earphone. Can you just repeat your question? Or just the question, not observation?
Sorry, yeah, the last 2 years, this whole cycle of accelerated churn, which is universal in nature.
Yeah.
And, so mother says night is darkest before the break of dawn. So what are the positives in the last 2 years? Thank you.
Well, positive things, obviously what you have mentioned yourselves. With tremendous advancement in technology, in matter. In fact, in one of our talks, Mother herself says matter itself is opening up not to supermind. It is ready to transform itself, change its own nature. It's that which you see in technology. So your mobiles, the G5, N5, whatever word we use. This is not happening. This could not have happened long before 1960 or 1956 or 1951. It is since supermind has touched matter and Prakriti that there is a tremendous acceleration in the transformation of matter, which now is coming to be known as technology, high technology, or artificial intelligence, and all that. That's only thanks to the new principle that has been brought down by them, a new consciousness that has come down. So that is the absolute positive thing. But the negative also, as you rightly mentioned, yes. Because this kind of a new consciousness, Sri Aurobindo or the mother, I don't know who has written that, there is an absolute cleansing of human nature. You see, till now, religion has been great in hiding all our darknesses under the carpet and then having a kind of a show piece and showing yourself a great devotee and a nice thing, go to the churches and the temples and all that and say, look, I'm a clean man, I got a white kurta, you see, I got a. No, Superman would say it's high time that all the muck that you have gathered within your nature, the subconscious nature, etc., is coming out. In fact, in one of his writings, Nurlikanta Gupta also refers to this, saying that all the violence that is coming out of humanity in the present decades is nothing but all that was suppressed in the human nature, not transformed, not transfigured. So all that is coming back. It's a recrudescence, he uses the word. It's coming back in order to be cleansed. So we are undergoing a big period of transition of violence, etc. But it is a kind of a crisis that is going on. But they would say this cleansing was required because we cannot be keeping all the dirt and muck under the carpet for long. So that is one of the characteristics of the supermind that really cleanses you. And that's where what you asked the question, plus and minus, you can say about that.
You can ask.
Yeah, there's one more question. You were speaking about how we have our understanding of aspiration, rejection, surrender, which is very limited. So could you elaborate on what is the true understanding and how should one aspire? If you can briefly throw some light on that.
Well, it's like asking a flower to say, how do I go toward the sun? It's as simple as that. Mother would say always the trees and the plants and the flowers, they move only toward the sun. So this is a word that I've used for aspiration also, as a quoted also says, whatever we want, that is the higher truth. That will not the higher truth. What we call in our scripture, what maybe mother's grace we call, mother's protection we call. But it is only, the word is only. That's what I said. She said, you people aspire, you are not sincere because you do not really follow what you want, you are aspiring for. That means some kind of a new life. I would say perhaps the aspiration, because I was emphasizing on this question of the psychic being, could perhaps be only for the psychic reawakening or the psychic awakening. So if you could aspire so that I may awaken my psychic being, so that my psychic being may come up and take control of my entire being, if that would be perhaps a deeper and a constant aspiration, I think we would be opening up many other possibilities. So in one word, as I gave the image of the sun or the plant moving toward the sun, the human beings also moving toward their own inner sun, that is the psychic being, which is nothing again but a mother's own consciousness. I would say about that, about aspiration.
Emphasized quite rightly that many people think that they are practicing integral yoga because they have not understood it. But then the ordinary person, is he really disqualified from the practice of integral yoga, or are there some basic elements that he should practice but does not, to be able to say that I am practicing integral yoga?
Is it a question for me? Well, Vigilanti, as you know too well, well, you see, if I say the word, that's what I said. Mother had insisted for those young people in the ashram when she was taking her classes in the ashram playground, that practice the Dhammapada first before you come to integral yoga. What does she mean? There is lots of practicing means there is a control. And this control has been very beautifully explained by in simple terms by the Buddha, and then Mother has given a lot of comments on that. So what it implies is that before you can claim to have this question of integral yoga, of course you can have the three principles broadly, but you have to see what does it imply. Even in the book The Mother, the Sri Aurobindo emphasizes on the question of rejection. Without rejection, purification, aspiration cannot be there. It can be there for a little bit of a time, but for the flame to rise up, you've got to pour in a lot of purified ghee. That purification of ghee or the purified ghee is not there in the being. We aspire to the little flame and we match it, we have a little matchstick on the candle, and very soon aspiration is forgotten, sincerely it is forgotten. But for that, this question of purification is there. And for the purification to last, of course, there is the contingent is there, the surrender. So if you say what are the things we want to practice, I would say first of all, let's practice the rejection, because that's the first thing she emphasized, purification required, and aspiring for the true inner being and not for having this kind of a fancy or fulfillment of a house or a job and all that. All that is the external thing. Or an inner aspiration to find one psychic being. If this can be constantly maintained, I would say yes, you are toward the integral yoga. Because again, integral yoga, as you said, Sri Aurobindo says, it's only when you realize the psychic being that you are beginning to practice integral yoga. Until then, we can be say, we are apprentices. There is nothing wrong about that. We are apprentices for integral yoga. I'm trying to do this. But the day you realize the psychic being, you say, now there's a beginning of integral yoga. Because from there's so much to be done. The transformation, the psychization, spiritualization, the superman. That is where the path begins. That is where the super integral yoga begins. Until then, we are apprentices. We are applicants. Fine. Let's not be, hesitant to say, hey, I'm only an apprentice. Why should we want to claim to be practicing integral yoga? Is it an extra feather on our head? It's not necessary. In fact, what we are doing honestly is an apprenticeship, aspiring for the grace of the Mother, so that the psychic being may open up. External changes are fine, but that will also come only by the psychic. So I think, let's be honest to say, we want to be, we are aspirants, we are apprentices for integral yoga. Because otherwise, this question of practicing as practitioner for integral yoga has become quite a popular term, and people think that if I say that I'm really somebody superior and I'm greater than all the other yogis or other yoga practitioners, it should not become a label of our ego. Let it be humble. Let us be humble. Because people have gone, been abroad, but people have even claimed that I'm practicing integral yoga last 3 years, last 4 years. As if, there's a moment we say since 2015, practicing integral yoga last 15 years I've been practicing. Been practicing means I don't know so what you have been doing. I really realized psychic being last 15 years. But it has become a kind of a kind of part of your CV to say practitioner of integral yoga last 10 years. So I'm saying it's more a label as if to say I'm a PhD, I'm a double PhD. That's a kind of a false thing that is coming into picture. But just to clarify a little bit further.
Ananda Bhai, there are no more questions, but at the same time, we have the privilege of having you, and every question can bring out something more from you, some more gems. So, may I ask one more question? In light of Savitri, in Savitri, in a way, there are 3 yogas: Yoga of Ashwapati, Yoga of Savitri, which we look upon as Yoga of Sri Aurobindo, and Yoga of the Mother, which is beyond the ordinary person. But then there is quite a bit of also what can be sadhana for the ordinary person, which may be considered how a person can begin on the path of integral yoga. So would you like to say something on the basis of Savitri?
dangerous place. Yes, it's true. Yoga of Ashwapati and Yoga of Savitri, are two distinct. They're distinct paths. At the same time, they are one single path, because in integral yoga we recognize the vertical and the horizontal. Yeah, there are indications. In fact, the mother in one of her diary notes write that Savitri is a complete system of yoga. That means complete system of integral yoga, which means all these elements of aspiration, rejection, humanity, transformation is all there. And also, as I rightly mentioned, it brings in the other factors, that is the human factor, where integral yoga can use the word rightly, to begin to practice yoga. So for human beings also, Sri Aurobindo has given us a lot of hints how to begin, where to begin, what could be our beginning, where we could really transform ourselves. That is there, no doubt about it. But that is there, spread out in many cantos. But the third yoga is what she said. It is of course, once the first one she says it's a system of yoga practiced by the author himself. And the second part is that what others are doing, it can be kind of this complete system of yoga. So what you said about the three yogas is perfectly all right. And there's no doubt. And all the little gems spread out here and there are given in this Mother Silent path and other paths. It's a wonderful thing. Really.
There is one more question in the chat box. Can we ask Dr. Reddy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. One of the participants is asking, along with having an aspiration to realize the psychic being, how else can one move in this direction towards knowing one's psychic?
Along with having an aspiration, well, how else can one move in this direction? Well, if I understand it rightly, you see, even this question of aspiration is not verbal or vocal. It's not just saying one's morning prayers, as it is normally understood. Morning prayers I've done, evening prayers I've done, Sandhyakal prayers I've done. That's not the kind of aspiration that we're looking for. Aspiration is a constant seeking. And that constancy of seeking for the psychic being can best be had through work. Work being offered. Work that is offered to the divine. Now here comes the constancy of aspiration for the psychic being. Because what we are trying to do is, because work we have to, and we do. I mean, willy-nilly, wanting or not wanting. So if this work element can be sincerely offered to the psychic flame, that is the constant memory and the link of the psychic being with the psychic being. And that what will increase the flame, the psychic flame, because this work is the fuel to increase the psychic flame. So I would say the easiest way, but not easiest, for me it may be the easiest, but for others it may be different, is work offering. Remember me and offer, there's a mantra that you know. So that remember me, you can call it the mother, you can call it the psychic flame, you can call it the divine within, whatever the terms you use, same consciousness. So the practical thing is to remember me and offer. And that would be part of an aspiration itself. Aspiration is not something different, it's not something mental and say, yeah, sit for meditation for half an hour, then aspire. No. It's aspiration through work. That itself is a great sadhana. So that is I would say, what other, or how else can one move here? This is a direct, constant move. And the most powerful, if I can use the word even, the most powerful thing to connect with the psychic being is work offering. Work again, don't take it as physical work. It could be vital work, your aesthetics, your drawings, your music, etc. And it could be your mental work. You're doing a writing, you're writing a paper, you're giving a talk. Work in the sense of where you're putting out energy. That's the definition of work. Work has nothing to do with physical, vital, mental. Wherever you're putting out a consciousness and energy out, that's work. So that energy, if it can be oriented to the psychic being or the divine mother, that's the direct path. In fact, that's the hotline, if I can use the word. So that is what is the meaning of aspiration. Of course, as I said, the amount of sincerity, a bit of sincerity helps us, guards us from falling down, falling, back into normal consciousness. I think in brief, that could be what I would like to add here.
Thank you. Dada, one more question. Could you talk a bit about Chit Shakti? And Sri Aurobindo and the mother say that true consciousness is true power. Could you talk a bit about that, please? Thank you. Hello?
Yeah, the word is true consciousness is true power.
Yes, Chit Shakti, true consciousness, true power. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's a statement about the question. You say true consciousness is true power. Yes, that is almost Vedic text.
Could you elaborate on that? The question is, could you elaborate on that?
How to elaborate on that? Yeah.
Thank you.
You see, true consciousness is true power. It's highly philosophical. It takes, you see, we have uttered all this thing, but you go back and you see in our own Vedas and Upanishads and Sri Aurobindo, we have this concept of Sat, Chit and Ananda. Existence, consciousness and bliss. So they are inseparably connected. In fact, they are one and the same. Only we, on a mental level, we have given the three names Sat and Chit and Ananda. There's no and. There's no Sat, Chit, Ananda. But Sri Aurobindo brings in a greater clarity, which was implied by the Vedic rishis, but Sri Aurobindo gives it a greater clarity by saying it is Sat, Chit, Tapas, and Ananda. So Chit, Tapas become one. So that means consciousness and force, they are inseparable. So wherever there is Chit, there is force. Wherever there is force, there is consciousness. You cannot separate them. It's like, as you said, the fire. The fire is light and the burning power. It's like the fire which we cannot split the light of the flame and the power of the flame to burn. So that this way, consciousness and Chit are always there. And then to come on the practical level, day-to-day level, you see, whatever is our level of consciousness, that means on that level of consciousness is our level of the mind or the physical or whatever. Now, if Chit and power are united, so the power also depends on the level of your consciousness. They're simultaneous. I mean, they're co-equal. So you cannot have a high consciousness of a rishi and then you cannot have the power that is very low. No, the power also increases its intensity and power by the fact of the increase of consciousness. That is why when we said, the Vedic rishis had tremendous power. It's not that they're wielding any power, it is automatic. They are high consciousness, so that high power. And coming to the last point, you see this question of transformation of the human beings or humanity, as we say. Sri Aurobindo says, you would like to transform humanity because my yoga is meant for divinity and not for humanity. What does it imply? That Sri Aurobindo wanted to bring down the supermind. That is the highest consciousness in manifestation. And if supermind is the highest consciousness, then the power is also the highest power available. And that power is required to transform the human being. Below supermind, there is a level of the overmind, all of that. But the power that consumes with the whole mind is not sufficient to transform the human nature. It can give human nature all this multiple, and religions and arts and dances and beauty and all that. But it hasn't the power to transform. So Sri saw that if you want to transform and have a great power, you must have a greater consciousness. And in fact, on a very practical level, this is what he did for the independence movement also. He says it's not the question of bullets, it's not the question of revolt, it's not the question of killing each other, it's not the question of. He said, I will bring down by a greater power, that means a greater consciousness, to give us this freedom movement. So he did not rely on the guns or this or that, on this movement that are going around killing each other and all that. He said, I must bring down a greater consciousness, so I must bring down a greater power to help us give this freedom. And that is why he takes up to sadhana. He says, I have to do sadhana to bring a higher consciousness which can help in giving us this freedom movement. So what historians do, they do not understand all that. Oh, they say, oh no, this is the political movement, the national movement, this is the person who gave us the politics. Nobody thinks of the higher consciousness. So Sri Aurobindo had a very clear idea that I will enter the freedom movement of the country only by bringing a higher consciousness. That means a higher power which can supersede all this Britain and this and all the parties, political parties. He had seen enough of that. So he's convinced that until and unless I bring a higher power, we cannot get the freedom movement. So this is what I can say, connected from the spiritual metaphysical level of Sasitananda to the level of manifestation of Sasitananda and the supermind and its power, and Sri Aurobindo's own practical purpose. And now lastly, this is exactly what we are supposed to do. If we want to achieve anything in our life, in our personal life, or not in your business life and all that, we have to raise the consciousness. That's why in every other sentences and every other book, the single word is raise your consciousness. That means you will get a higher power to manifest in your own being, manifest in your own work, manifest in your own environment, etc. So this is the conjoint meaning of consciousness and power.
There is one last question in the chat box.
How can one have it? Have what? How
What
can one have?
what is a spiritual experience and how can one have it?
Or what is the spiritual experience? Well, what's the meaning of spiritual? To understand that, if I can say, how can I have the experience of ice cream? You say each time you will have it. So now, what is the meaning of spirituality? If you define that, then you'll get it clear. You see, with this word again of spirituality has been so much misused, misapplied. And this question of yoga also being so much misused and misapplied. But basically, essentially, fundamentally, spirituality is nothing but connection with the spirit. Now, what is the spirit? It's not, it could be the spirit in nature, it could be the spirit in the garden roses, it could be the spirit in the sunrise and sun. All that could be part of spirituality. But essentially, spirituality is connecting the spirit within and be in constant connection with that entity, what we call the Atman, the psychic being. So this is the spiritual experience, means when you have this connection with the psychic flame, then you say, I have a spiritual experience. Otherwise, there could be all kinds of expressions of the sun, of the psychic being. When you look at a rose, a beautiful morning rose, you say, oh, it was almost spiritual. When I look at a beautiful raga, malgons, then I say, wow, it was almost a spiritual experience. Why do you say that? Because that means there's some kind of a reverberation between the object and my inner being. So that also we can say spiritual experience. But you must be sincere and feel that there's something reverberating from within. It's not a mental concept, it's not this vital thing, a preference. So that is an outer expression of a spiritual vision. But that true spirituality, Sri Aurobindo would say, is connecting with your own inner being. Until and unless that is not spiritual, it could be vital expression, it could be aesthetic expression, it is kind of a mental expression which is vast and which has a lot of different levels. It could be higher mind, intuitive mind, intuition mind, all kinds of things. But spirituality is only connecting with the spirit. As you said, geography is matter. As you said, biology is with the body. So spirituality with the spirit, that is the psychic being. So how can you have it? Yes, connecting with the inner being. Now you say, how can you connect the inner being? Well, I think Bilanji has to give me another hour to explain that. I think I'm already running out of time, but I'm happy that you people have gone beyond the scheduled period. So it's a very interesting thing, as you said, we could discuss longer time, but it's all up to Bilanji sir.
Yes, keeping the constraints of time in mind, we will bring this session to a close, but then you once again answered that question about spiritual experience in such a beautiful way, connecting the exotic with something as down to earth as how do you get the experience of an ice cream. So I think that was a beautiful way of building up that bridge. Now I think we are ready for another spiritual experience, if I might call it, and that is in the melodious voice of Deepshikha ji.
Okay. त्वमेवासि विश्वस्य सारम्
जगज्जालपालो निरोधे निधिस्त्वम् त्वमेवासि विश्वस्य सारं निदानम् परः सच्चिदानन्द संघातमूर्ति परः सच्चिदानन्द संघातमूर्ति ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द त्वमोङ्काररूपो रणव्योमशून्ये ज्वलन् सूर्यभासासि सावित्रमन्त्र त्वमोङ्काररूपो रणं व्योमशून्ये ज्वलन् सूर्यभासासि सावित्रमन्त्र अनाघातनाद चिदाकाशमध्ये अनाघातनाद चिदाकाशमध्ये ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द महायोगिवर्यो महैश्वर्यशाली महाज्ञानविज्ञान पारङ्गमस्तम् महायोगिवर्यो महैश्वर्यशाली महाज्ञानविज्ञान पारङ्गमस्तम् महाप्रेमसिन्धुर् महात्यागवीर महाप्रेमसिन्धुर् महात्यागवीर ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द ततस्त्वं शरण्यो ममैवारविन्द जयति जयति जय जय मामीरा जय जय श्री अरविन्द जयति जयति जय जय मामीरा जय जय श्री अरविन्द जय जय श्री अरविन्द जय जय श्री अरविन्द जयति जयति जय जय मामीरा जय जय श्री अरविन्द दसों दिशा से चुपके चुपके स्वर तेरा गुंजार करे सोम बड़े छल के रित आकर श्रृंगार करे प्रेम सुधा के प्यासे हैं हम प्रेम सुधा के प्यासे हैं हम बालक वृद्ध जन वृंदा जयति जय जय मामीरा जय जय श्री अरविंद हे विश्वंभर हे चिर सुंदर जीवन में झनकार करो फल प्रतिफल में आलोकित कर मधुर भक्ति संचार करो अंतर बाहर के मामा निखिल शक्ति आनंद जयति जयति जय जय महावीरा जय जय श्री अरविंद जय जय श्री अरविंद जय श्री अरविंद
Both of us can be there.